The strangest things can happen in life, you know. In 2005, I was hit down by a drunk hit and run driver, and I died. It happened on the expressway outside town, a lonely stretch of road where the bush swallowed noise and the street lights were few and far between. The headlights came weaving in the dark, too fast, too careless. A bumper found me before I could even flinch. There was a flash of white paint, then silence. I looked down at my body lying by the road, hidden in the grasses, and realized without panic I was gone. I drifted as the road shrank behind me. No tunnel of light, no angels or hymns, just a quiet pool as though memory itself was calling me back to where I belong. When I reached my street, a neighbor's mongrel by the gate whimpered. Dogs always know. I slipped through my own back door like a formless precipitate of smoke. The kitchen sink was stacked with unwashed plates. The television was on, and my mother was half asleep with the remote in her hand. I wanted to say, "Mama, I'm home," but no sound came out, and that's when I understood I wasn't meant to be heard or seen. She stared, uneasy, then opened her eyes. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw a figure by the door. Then it was gone, and she told herself she was dreaming. I wanted to kneel by her side, to explain, to comfort, but what could I say? What could I tell my mother? That I had been hit down by a driver? That I was now a ghost? I couldn't bring myself to tell her that, even if I could. I thought of my room, and in an instant I was there. I sat on my bed, and though it didn't bend under me, I felt the weight of the night pressing down with harsh reality. I was home, but I wasn't, and that was only the beginning. At dawn, the neighborhood stared awake at the rooster's crow. People started going about their early morning routines, greetings, exchanging pleasantries, fetching water, preparing of wares for market. Morning had come, but not for me. I was still in my room, watching the sunlight slide across the wall and empty bed. My phone screen buzzed with missed calls, friends maybe, or work. The world was moving on. I wasn't. Mama's voice came from the sitting room. "Charlie? Charlie?" Her slippers slapped against the tiled floor as she checked each room. She thought I had returned late, too tired to greet her, and crashed on my bed. But when she found only emptiness, her heart tightened. She paused at the doorway, staring at the neatly dressed bed. It was unlike her son to disappear overnight without a word. Her motherly instincts sharpened. Her spirit knew something was wrong. I followed her silently as she went outside. My father was sitting on the veranda sipping hot Lipton tea. He looked tired. When Mama told him I hadn't come home, he brushed it aside. "He's a grown man now," he said with a wave of his hand. "Maybe he slept over at a friend's place." But his voice had a tremor hidden beneath the firmness that betrayed a deep-rooted feeling of uneasiness and worry. I wanted to shout, to tell them both where I was, or at least that I was near, but the truth sank deeper. I was here, yet not here. They could not hear me, no matter how hard I wailed it. I drifted back into the streets, restless. The morning bustle was louder now. Okadas revving, school children in uniforms walking, hawkers calling out their wares. Life carried on untouched by my ghostly presence. But I noticed something else. As I passed people, some shivered suddenly as though a cold hand brushed their cheeks or their skin. One woman turned sharply, eyes darting around before hurrying away. A child stopped mid-play, staring directly at me before bursting into tears. Could they sense me? I began to think that perhaps there was a way to communicate and get across to someone. Then an idea came to me, and suddenly I knew what to do. The house was awake but uneasy. Mama moved about with a forced energy, sweeping, banging pots, pretending the clatter was ordinary. But beneath it, she was listening for the sound of my footsteps, my cough, my careless humming. They never came. Papa sat in the sitting room, newspaper unfolded, though he hadn't turned the page in 10 minutes. His jaw was tight. He didn't like the silence, not this kind. It was not the first silence between us anyway. For months, a rift had grown like a crack in the wall. Papa wanted responsibility, discipline, the steady path. I wanted something else, freedom, space, air. He would say, "Charlie, you waste your time with friends and music." And I would mutter, "At least I'm not bitter like you." Words had hung heavy, unspoken after that. Mama always tried to patch things, her voice pleading softly between our exchanges. I watched as the uncertainty caused them both to grieve without knowing it, in their own way. Mama with worry, Papa with stubborn pride. I had to get across to them somehow. I remembered again the idea I heard earlier. I thought of my phone. Could I? Could a ghost use it? The idea felt foolish, but I pressed my will into the device. The screen flickered and the name appeared. Tunde. Tunde was my closest friend, the one who knew most of my secrets, who had listened to my rants about wanting to leave home, about Papa never understanding me. If anyone could carry my message, it was him. His phone buzzed in his own room across town. Tunde squinted at the SMS, confused. Bro, I need you. Tell my parents I've gone away. They shouldn't look for me. I'll be fine. Charlie. He sat up, staring. Tried calling my line, but it had gone off. His younger sister poked her head in. Who's testing you this early? No one, he muttered. Still, he dressed quickly and left for my house. From where I hovered, I whispered to the wind, Forgive me, Tunde. I had no other way. Tunde broke the news to my parents. They were torn between some sort of relief that at least they had heard from me, and yet an uncertainty about where I could have gone. They decided to cling to the false relief, and it seemed to set me free in a way, for I felt yet another pull, another drift, something tugging me in my spirit, carrying me away, giving me weight again. One night, far away in another state, I opened my eyes, on a dusty roadside, alone. There I was, standing solid, barefoot but whole. Not a ghost. Okay, maybe still one in a way, but now visible, physical, flesh. I raised my hand to my chest and felt my heart beat. It thundered like a drum. I touched my face. It was mine. Charlie's face. I didn't question it too much. The world had bent its rules for me. All I knew was that I had been given a second chance. It somehow is I, Charlie. I couldn't go back home. What would I tell them? I somehow just knew that confronting my parents, or anyone I knew, anyone that knew me from before the accident, would fizzle out this shot at being alive again. So instead, I walked. I walked until I reached a small city where nobody knew me. That was where I met her. Her name was Amara. She ran a tiny bookshop at the corner of town beside the market. Good afternoon. First time here? She greeted me as I pretended to browse the shelves. Her voice was calm and her smile enchanting. Yes, I said. I just moved into town. Welcome, she said, straightening some pile of books. Most people come here for market wares, not books. It's nice to see someone different. I smiled back. Different? Is that a compliment? Her dimples flashed. Maybe. We sort of resonated. I went back the next day, and the day after. Each time she had a story or a joke waiting. She laughed easily, her laughter ringing through the shop like a song. One evening she turned to me. You don't talk much about yourself, Charlie. It's like you are hiding a whole other life. I swallowed, forcing a grin. Maybe I am. I tried to make a joke out of her concern, diverting. Her eyes lingered on mine, curious, searching. Then she smiled softly. Well, whoever you were before, you're not so bad now. The street light flickered above us as we walked side by side into the night. For the first time since the accident, I felt alive. Not just in body, but in heart. Amara was beginning to see me, to trust me, to consider me. And I, reborn by a mystery I couldn't explain, was daring to step into another life. When I first arrived in the city, I had nothing but the clothes on my back and the strange gift of being alive. I wandered the streets until I found the Face Me I Face You compound, where I paid for a room, grateful that the landlord didn't ask much questions. I had made some money earlier in the day carrying loads for traders at the market. The room was small, one window, one rusty bed frame, a thin mattress, but it was mine, a place to pretend that I was just another young man starting a life. Over the days, Amara and I grew closer. She still probed me once in a while about my past life, and I always evaded carefully. One evening while we were outside behind her house, it suddenly began to drizzle. Somehow the caress of our clothes to our bodies and the chill of the rain lit a fire of desire. Amara hugged me and we kissed, and then hurried inside, flinging our clothes to the floor. In the next few weeks, Amara glowed a lot. Her glow and the love in her eyes could not be hidden. When she did the dishes, or arranged clothes, or even among her friends. Her friends began to ask her more about this mystery boyfriend of hers who made her this radiant. So one evening, Amara insisted I followed her to the cafe to meet her friends. I didn't quite like the idea, but I couldn't find any excuse to tell her why I wouldn't want to meet her friends. In any case, she almost literally dragged me there and introduced me to them. We shook hands and exchanged pleasantries. But one of them, Ngozi, had a suspicious look in her eyes. I smelled trouble. I noticed over the days after my meeting with her friends that Amara's heart was no longer steady and at ease with me. She still laughed with me, still clung to my hand when we walked home in the evenings, but there was a faint shadow of doubt, of questions in her eyes. Somehow, Ngozi's suspicion had found a way into her heart. I could feel it in the way she sometimes paused before answering me, or studied my face as though trying to read beyond the words I spoke. One day, when I went to see Amara, she looked into my eyes with part smile and part trepidation, part hope and part fear. "Charlie," she whispered, "I'm carrying your child." The words pierced through me like sunlight breaking through a dark room. "A child? Mine? How possible?" I smiled at her and held her close, masking the heavy weight of responsibility that the news had dropped on me. "We'll have to tell my parents soon," she said. "They will want us to marry before the baby comes. And Charlie, I want to know your people too. It is time." I kissed her forehead, stalling. "Soon, Amara, soon. Let's just wait a little. Things are complicated." "Complicated?" She pulled back, searching my face. "What's so complicated about family? Or don't you love me enough to marry me?" I had no answer that wouldn't unravel my secret, but somehow I managed to convince her to wait till after the baby was born before we proceed with meeting both families and marrying properly. The months rolled on, baby growing within her, as questions also grew, especially after each of her meetings with Ngozi, who could no longer hide her suspicion and disdain for me. When her time was due one night, Ngozi and another friend of hers helped me get her to the hospital. I paced the hospital lobby, struggling between fear, hope, and inquisitiveness. Was a child born of me really going to come into this world, despite me being a ghost? Was I, Charlie, really going to have a child? Would it be a boy or a girl? What next after the child is born? Soon, amidst Amara's cries of labor pangs, the wails of a newborn pierced the air. The midwife stepped out, sweat on her brow, but a smile on her lips. "It's a boy," she said. We rushed inside where Amara lay, exhausted but smiling as she cradled the small bundle. Everyone was in awe as we saw the boy open and blink his tiny eyes. He was a spitting image of me. Events spiraled in the next few months. Having convinced Amara to wait for the baby to grow a bit before we go and see both our families, I made arrangements with my landlord to stand in for my father when we would go to see Amara's parents, with the excuse that my father was too old and sick to travel, and my mother was the only one caring for him, so she couldn't also come. Ngozi didn't like it, but there was nothing Amara could do. The meeting with Amara's family was brief, and instead of doing just an introduction, a quick low-key marriage rites fulfillment was done. When my landlord explained about my parents' absence, Amara's parents were overwhelmed by the fact that they had a grandson. The next was now to go and see my own parents. I sensed the end drawing near. The end of this adventure, this second life. I was beginning to feel that pull again, tugging within. The journey was a silent one, just me, Amara, and the baby at the back of a taxi we chattered. When we got to my compound after many hours on the road, Amara was more than relieved. "Please, head on to the house just there and knock. I'll be right behind you with the luggage," I said. My parents were surprised to see a beautiful young woman carrying her baby at their doorstep, alone. "Good afternoon, Mama," Amara greeted. "I am Charlie's wife. He's right behind," she was saying as she looked back towards where the taxi had been, but I had vanished. My mother could not believe her eyes. "Charlie's wife? My own Charlie?" She ran back inside, sobbing. My father was more composed. He welcomed a rather confused Amara inside with her baby, their grandson, and asked her to sit down. Word had quickly spread around, and a few neighbors trooped into the house while Amara narrated her story. When she was done, my father sighed heavily, then explained to her that their son, Charlie, had been found decomposing days after he went missing. Apparently, he had died in an accident. Amara wailed and fainted. My mother and all the other women joined in the weeping. Even children around couldn't help but cry. This was a really sad spectacle. The elders shook their head and sobbed. This type of things happen once in a while. Rare, yes, but it happens. They declared that there would be sacrifices that would make the spirit of the dead to be severed from the living so that the dead could find rest finally. They did the sacrifice as my parents accepted Amara and my child, who they named after me, Charlie, with whole hearts, and I finally found peace.